Hi everyone. My name is Bridget Arndell. I'm a project manager at Community Nature Connection. CNC is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to increase access to the outdoors for communities impacted by racial, socioeconomic, disability injustices by eliminating existing barriers through advocacy, community-centered programming, and workforce. Thank you for joining us today for this native plant Q&A with Antonio Sanchez. This course is brought to you as part of CNC's Training Institute, which offers training and certification programs that are aimed at increasing knowledge and skill building in outdoor related fields. If you have any suggestions for trainings you'd like to see, feel free to email us at training@communitynatureconnection.org. If you have any questions throughout this session today, feel free to drop them in the chat box, and then I'll ask those to Antonio during the questions period in the order that they're received. Before we begin the training today, I want to acknowledge this land that Community Nature Connection operates on. We do acknowledge the land on which CNC operates as the ancestral lands and home of the Tongva, Tataviam, Quiche, and Chumash peoples, original stewards and custodians of this territory. We recognize that their continuing connection to the land, waters, and culture, and we pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Thank you all for being here with us. It's my pleasure to turn it over to Antonio, who will introduce himself and his work as a horticulturist at Samo Fund.
Thanks, Bridget. All right, guys. I hope you're ready to, this is gonna be a crazy hour and a half. Don't ever give me the mic with no plan, just to freestyle and take questions, because it's gonna be crazy. Am I sharing my screen right now, Bridget? Look at technology, crazy. Let's see. If you guys know me, if anybody of you know me, you might know that I'm really bad at technology. And so,
wait, introduce yourself for the folks that don't know you.
Okay, sorry. It's because I see Felipe there, and yeah, so my name is Antonio Sanchez. I get to work at the national parks right now. I don't work for the national parks. I don't have to tuck my shirt in every day, but I get to work on the national parks, and I get to grow and run the nursery here in the Santa Monica Mountains. And we've been lucky enough to be part of a program that has the largest seed collection of Santa Monica Mountains native seed in the world, which sounds cool. And then you look at our little freezers that have it, it's like, oh, it's not that. It's only about 1,100 different collections, but we do everything from collect seed to go out and restore some oaks and different habitats that have been either destroyed or neglected or beat up. We're doing that right now this morning and this afternoon. We get to grow a lot of plants. We grow over 50,000 plants a year. We do a lot of cool stuff. And I've been in the native plant world for over 15 years. I used to work at Rancho Santa Ana Botanic Garden, which is now called California Botanic Garden. That's the largest native plant botanic garden in California. So I ran their nurseries for 4 years. I used to work at the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden. I was a landscaper there. I used to own my own retail native plant nursery, called Nopalito Native Plant Nursery, that I love. And one day I'm going to get a tattoo of our logo with my cousin, my primo, who started the nursery with me, and a good friend. And so we have business experience too. We know what it's like to try to sell these plants to the public. We're open for 4 years, and we got hit in the face every day with the reality that people want native plants, but they also want sexy native plants. And it's such a hard competition with native plants against what Home Depot and Lowe's are selling. I went to school for sustainable agriculture. I did not finish school, but I did study some courses on sustainable ag. I used to work way before native plants. I used to work on farms, a lot of smaller organic farms. So I have a background in just growing like row crops, like strawberries, tomatoes, watermelons. So I love growing plants. It's my life. That's the only thing I do. I don't do it very well, but I have learned a few things on the way. So I would love to share with you guys what I've learned. And I encourage you guys to ask no questions are bad questions. I see this plant in the hills. It's purple. What is it? That's a good question. Whatever questions you guys have, I would love to try to answer, or probably direct you to either a website or somebody who could answer it. So I think I'm going to need Bridget's help in a second, but let me I think before we start, hopefully you guys are here in this class. Hopefully you have at least started to grow native plants. If you haven't, you should just hang up this talk and go start like immediately. And then once you make all your mistakes, then come back to this class next year. But if you guys don't feel like going out right now, if you guys want to just go through this class anyways, cool. But this will be a lot better class once you have killed some stuff. And it's inevitable that you're going to kill native plants, that you're going to hurt native plants. And it's a sad thing, but it's our reality because most of us don't come from growing native plants. We come from a culture that likes to take care of everything. Like you ever go to your grandma's house and you tell your abuelita, like, I'm good, I just ate. She's like, no, mijo, sit down and eat. Like she feeds you like twice, even though you just ate like an hour before. Like we came from a lot of us come from caring backgrounds. This is what we do with our plants. And native plants are good. They just ate an hour ago and they don't need to eat for like 2 more weeks. They're straight. So let me give you a few ideas that I wish I kind of knew. And this might go over a few of your head. But I hope that most of you guys can get most of these tips, because if we get these tips, then you're going to get where I'm coming from. And a lot of times you might understand some of the mistakes that you have already made. So got 15 tips on here. The first one is CalFlora, and that's a website that I love using. So let me switch screens real quick and take you to this. So this is, on the left is a picture of California buckwheat. I love this plant. Buckwheats are my favorite types of native plants. I would like to one day write a book about our California buckwheats. I don't think you have really become a native plant gardener in California until you know the buckwheats and you use them. But anyways, there's over 100 buckwheats in California. But what I'm interested is on the right, the map of California, the political border of California. All those little blue dots are areas where we know that California buckwheat occurs in what I call native nature, or what people call the wild, or naturally, like natural occurrences. And so when I see something like this on CalFlora, all I have to do is type in California buckwheat, or I can type in the scientific name, Eriogonum fasciculatum, and this map will come up. And I love using this map because usually this tells me how easy a plant is to grow. It also tells me where it grows, right? So you can see it goes up past San Francisco on the coast, goes inland in Bakersfield, out towards Vegas, down into Baja. It's here in Oxnard, Ventura, in LA, San Diego. It's everywhere. When I see a plant like this, I know it's usually almost always easy to grow. And the best way I can relate it is if someone who grew up in Oxnard, right, and then went to LA for school, and then did some time over, not prison time, but maybe it could be prison time, went over to San Luis Obispo and did some time, maybe had a 7-Eleven job in Santa Cruz, and then went to the desert and then like opened up a small business. When you have these different life experiences, it usually makes you a well-rounded person, as opposed to somebody who maybe grew up in Beverly Hills, never had to work. I'm not knocking Beverly Hills, but, and then one day just has to go out on their own. That could be a tough life. All they know is this one life. And that's what we see with plants that occur in very small areas. They only occur in one location. Usually it's rocky soil on the Channel Islands. Sometimes those are the hardest plants to put in our gardens because they're so used to Beverly Hills and having everything for them, right? They're so used to this very unique situation where when we see plants that grow in a wide, adaptable, wide distribution, they're usually very, very easy for us to grow. They can grow in full sun, part shade sometimes. They can grow in clay soil, sandy soil. They can take drip irrigation. They can take overhead. Sometimes they can take no irrigation. So I love using CalFlora because it lets me know where the over 6,000 plants that are native to California occur in the wild or native nature. And it's a real strong tool for designers, landscapers, and people who are trying to site plants correctly, right? We're trying to find plants that are local to our area. So the second tip is who's afraid? So sometimes when I write these lists, like it's like 11 or 12 at night and I've had like 3 or 4 beers and it sounds cool. And then I read them when I'm sober during the day. I'm like, what? This makes no sense. What does this mean? Who is afraid of black widows? Who's afraid of, I don't even know what that means. So what it means is, you know how like people are afraid of black widows and like people are afraid of like dying or getting stung by black widows. And with all, I don't want to, all due respect to people who have ever been damaged by black widows, but I don't know anybody. It's like the boogie monster. Like people talk about it, but there's very few people who have ever gotten bitten by a black widow, much less people who have died. And again, I don't mean in disrespect, but it's something that we talk about, but it never really happens, right? So to me, clay soil is the black widow of the native plant landscape world. People are scared of clay soil everyone has clay soil. If you go to your attic, to your garage, to wherever, you have black widows, but no one's getting bit by black widow on a regular basis. And with clay soil, it is some of the best soil you can have in the world. And we see these labels on nurseries. We go to these websites that says need good drainage. Can't do it in clay soil. And to me, that is a complete lie. It's a complete myth. What you don't want to do is mess with your clay soil. You don't want to put drip irrigation on your clay soil. You don't want to go to your attic, turn over that old brick, that old pile of cinder blocks, and just start poking at it and get the black widows to bite you. That's what you do when you put a drip irrigation system that has 2 gallons an hour and you put that system on for 5 minutes every day. You're poking, you're asking that black widow to bite you, and it's going to bite you, and it's going to bite your white sage, it's going to bite your dudley, it's going to bite your monkey flower eventually. It's going to kill those because you're poking it. What I recommend if you have clay soil is to try out those plants that people are trying to scare you of. But what you need to do is reduce a lot, the amount of water you're putting on your clay soil, because clay soil has a ton of nutrients, but it holds on to water, right? It's like a fist. It's just holding on to water. And rocky soil is like a loose fist. It lets it go pretty quick, right? So maybe I'll get more into that, but don't be afraid of clay soil. It's better for our plants, but you just have to know how to manage it. The third tip I have is think of our plants as Ishi. And Ishi is, some folks say, the last native person in California who lived out in his ancestral lands. Ishi died in the early 1900s, but before he died, he had walked out of his territorial homes. All of his people had died. All his family had died. Some folks from San Francisco recognized that this is the last of a native person from his ancestral lands. Let's take him in. Let's take care of him, and let's try to help him. There's a lot of racism and other stuff that went on, but a guy from a museum in San Francisco, an anthropologist, became very good friends with Ishi, and he said, Ishi, I want to go back to your home. I want to see how your people used to live. All your people are dead, but I would like to see how you guys used to live. And so he took Ishi out there, and Ishi showed him where they used to hunt. He showed him the foods that they use, the plants that they use for food, the plants and the animals that they use for clothing. He showed them what they use for weaponry, everything, for medicine, like I said, the whole 9 yards. It would have been great if Ishi had 30 or 40 more people to help him hunt, to help him collect. It's very hard to do that with one person. But the point is, Ishi was home and he knew what to do. And that anthropologist needed to do very little for Ishi. And what I want you to think about when you plant your native plants is to treat your plants as if they're Ishi. They're home. They don't need very much. You don't need to go to Ishi if he's in a healthy community and bring him food. He's got food. You don't need to bring him weapons. He's got weapons. You don't need to bring him medicine. He has medicine. Would he like a pizza every few weeks? Hell yes. I would like a pizza right now. I haven't eaten lunch. But what happens is if we bring Ishi pizza every day, we know Native folks, Latinx folks, Black folks, a lot of different folks, we start to get diabetes. We start to get a lot of different diseases because we're used to one thing and we quickly switch over to another thing. And it can be very, very hard on us. Our native plants are collected from the wild sometimes. They're collected from native nature. And they remember for thousands of years what it's like to have rain in March and be dry for 6 months. And so I want to encourage you to treat your plants like Ishi and bring him a pizza every 3 weeks. Bring him a 6-pack of beer every month. And that's watering once a month. That's watering every 2 weeks. But once you start giving him pizza and beer every day, he's going to have fun for a few weeks. And then you wonder why your white sage is dead, because you didn't respect the fact that he was home and that he already knew what to do, and you kept bringing him Bud Light. Let me make a disclaimer. If you guys want to bring me Bud Light, I will take it. I will happily take some right now. You can Venmo me that, or however people get stuff like Yahoo, Amazon, or how people deliver stuff. Next one, winter water. Winter water is the most important water for our California native plants. Like I said, they're from California. They remember California for over 1,000 years. They are used to being wet during the winter. When we do not have water during the winter, you need to add water during the winter. So people are not adding enough water during the winter. They try to make up for it during the summer. They go to sleep during the summer, or they don't want to grow during the summer. The soil's 90 degrees. You have 90 degrees, wetness, humidity. That's Georgia. That's Houston. That's not California. Our plants die. We need to do winter water. The next one, when you guys plant, you guys want to plant small pots. The bigger the pots you plant, the longer they take to get established. The best way I can describe it is my mom, rest in peace, she used to wear tacones. She used to wear high heels a lot. And her foot would be crushed at the end of the day. You could see her foot and it would just be crushed because for years she would wear these tacones and it would form. The larger a pot, the more that plant has remembered. Those roots are crushed like my mom's foot. And my mom could go a year without wearing those high heels and her foot wouldn't go back to normal. These large pots, I've seen it a lot of times, guys, 5-gallon, 15-gallon, 24-inch boxes that you're paying $100 for, $200 for. You put them in the ground, it's like my mom's foot. It's not gonna root. The roots are stuck. And it takes over a year, sometimes 2 years to break the memory, right? So plant the small, it's like when you plant small plants, it's like my mom barely starting to wear high heels for only a month and she could see her foot's getting little. She stops wearing them, she's good. The plants grow like crazy. You have first year plants that are established and they're beautiful. The next one, 2 to 5 gallons. You guys need to apply, you need to give 2 to 5 gallons of water to every plant you plant the first 2 times you water. It sounds like a lot of water. It is a lot of water. But what we're doing is reverse. Usually we have seeds in the ground that are native in native nature. There's rain, there's fire. The rain will accumulate in a little corner. It'll get the seed fat and it'll wake up and it'll drill a little hole. There's more rain, it'll drill and then it'll stop growing. Next year it'll grow. We're doing the opposite. We're putting a fully formed plant in the ground and we need to get water under the plant. If you guys are just watering half a gallon, you never get the water under the plant and the plant can never get fully established. Tree of Life Nursery, who I'm friends with. I love Mike Evans from Tree of Life Nursery. They made a very good series of videos on how to water your first few times. I recommend you checking out Tree of Life Nursery's videos on how to water. Next one, when you're designing with native plants, again, everyone does everything different, but I would recommend having 50 to 75% of your native plant garden evergreen. That's stuff that's always green. It never goes to sleep, right? It never drops most of its leaves. Like our native sages are beautiful, but for the most part, they drop a lot of their leaves during the summer. They're smart. They're going to sleep. And it's like a bear. The bears go to sleep during the winter because there can be very little food. It's going to be cold. Our plants do the opposite. They're almost like bears during the summer. They know there's no rain. There's a lot of heat. They drop their leaves and they go to sleep during the summer. There are plants, beautiful plants that never drop their leaves. Coyote bush, lemonade berry, manzanitas, ceanothus. These are some of the most common landscape plants, buckwheats, that we use as our cornerstone plants. When you use 50 to 75% of these plants as your design plants, then it doesn't look so bad when the other plants start to go dormant. What happens is people usually do 75% dormant plants, and that looks like it looks pretty bad. It looks like a Sanchez family reunion picture, like in summer. Brown, it's just brown, right? Ain't nothing wrong with brown, but people usually want that much brown in their garden. So more evergreen, less dormancy. And again, that's up to you, right? Whenever you're researching something, always use more than one source of info, one book, one website. A lot of websites, a lot of these things are coming from Northern California, Central California. They have much more water than we do. Make sure you're doing at least 2 resources. November through March for landscapers, for nursery folks, even for gardeners who are going to do their own work. November through March should be your most important time. You should cancel everything else. If you go to Mexico every December and you're a landscaper, you should stop going to Mexico because December, I know where my mom's from, all of December is taken off. The whole village, the whole rancho just parties. But December is the most important time. It's cold. There's usually a little bit of rain and everything is waking up. And that's the best time to cut, to fertilize, to replant, to adjust, and to plant new plants. For beginners, I would avoid some of the plants that people say are hard. People say Arctostaphylos glauca, big berry manzanita is hard. Just stop. Don't plant it if you're a beginner. Just stop. It's expensive and you're probably going to kill it. People say bush lupins are hard. Just stop. Try the easier stuff. And once you get that down, then try the harder stuff. The native plants can be hard for people. Matilaha poppy, monkey flowers, dahlias, they're beautiful plants, but don't use them as a beginner because you're going to get frustrated. All you're going to end up doing is going to like rosemary and lavender and planting non-native plants. When you fertilize, most people say don't fertilize native plants in the ground. I agree with them. But what I like to do is replicate what lavender farms, what olive orchards, what vineyards, what grape vineyards. Those are 3 types of Mediterranean type plants: olives, lavenders, and grapes. Those are all from low water areas like California. The good, organic, sustainable growers, they fertilize those with compost during the late winter. So compost is a very low, it's almost like a multivitamin. It's not really a food for the plants. It's just a healthy, like, soil amendment. And what it does is it feeds the plants slowly over time. And it needs to be wet, really, for it to feed. And so the best time for it to feed is when the plants are waking up and when it's the wettest in California. That's January, February, March. So I strongly recommend, if you want to fertilize, that we add this minimal impact, this low fertilizer, compost, worm castings, etc., to our plants during the late winter, early spring. And as the rain comes, or as you're watering, it'll start slowly feeding your plants. I love this. I use it all the time, and it works beautifully. I don't recommend doing it for manzanitas, cenotes, stuff that you're not pruning, but everything that you're pruning back or that you're, watering extra, whatever, it should get lightly fertilized. When you're doing design, make sure you're doing spring. Spring is easy. You can go to a nursery and you can find stuff flowering for spring. Make sure you get some stuff that flowers in the summer and the fall, because you're going to be pissed off come September 18th when you're like, man, remember those sages? They were beautiful. Yeah, they were. And you have 75% sages and no one wants to come over your house, not because of COVID, but because they just don't want to look like they're going to some homeless dude's house. Ain't nothing wrong with homeless dudes, but they don't want to hang out at that homeless dude's house. They're cool. Next, desert plants. California has over 6,000 plants. A lot of them are for deserts. What happens in the desert during the summer? It rains, chubascos, monsoons. Those plants are used to those. And so they're actually pretty easy to grow if you're treating them like ishi, if you're watering them every now and then. And so what they do is they usually leaf out and they flower during the summer right away. So I love using desert plants like abutilon, Indian mallow, Straussea, desert mallow. There's a whole bunch like desert willow, palo verde. There's a bunch of really good desert plants that respond well to summer water, and they naturally flower during the summer. And they're beautiful companions to make our gardens look great in the summer and the fall. During the summer, which to me is basically the dry season, I call that May through October. During May through October, you should be watering your garden 2 to 3 times a month. Any more is overkill. Any more, you just have a lawn. 2 to 3 times a month for Southern California, chaparral, coastal sage scrub, oak woodland plants. That's all you need. And for me, a goal for a local garden should be 50% native plants at least. No invasive plants that reseed in the wild. And we should be using more edible natives, more ceremonial plants, more medicinal plants, and plants that are important to you, your people, and your culture. And that last one is containers. I have 3 questions on containers today. So I think I'll just talk about containers as a whole separate thing. So, man, Bridget, I'm like, I have 1 slide, 2 slides. You're like, yeah, that'll be done in like 2 minutes. This vato can talk. Let's start getting some questions now that we're on the same page, maybe. I'm going to leave this up because I would like anybody who's interested to join me for a free training program. Half of it's online, 5 weeks of it online, and we rotate every other week is in person here at the nursery. We'll show you how to do cuttings. We'll show you how to sow seed and clean seed. We'll show you how to do landscape maintenance. We're going to do some maintenance tomorrow. I would encourage you guys to email me if you're interested, and that's going to start in May. So how do we do this, Bridget?
So I'll just read the question and then you can answer.
Okay, if I don't know the answer, I'm going to do my eyes like this. And that'll be my sign that I didn't hear you, and just go to the next one.
Okay, sounds good. First question is from Melissa, and it says, I live near the lower Las Virgenes area, and is it helpful to remove non-native plants? Would it be helpful to bring non-native plants in and care for them?
Ooh, Melissa, I didn't know that we were going to be on a boat in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and then it capsized and we just sinking, because this is getting deep already, Melissa. This is getting deep. So that's a very deep question, Melissa. What we don't like to do here at the parks, and myself personally, is we do not like, I have no problem with non-native plants. Most of my family's from Mexico. We have a bunch of amazing plants from Mexico that you would want to keep. Maybe they brought them from Mexico. Maybe they found them at Lowe's and they remind them of something. Maybe they use them for food, for medicine. We have so many reasons why we use plants. My threshold for not using a native or a non-native is we shouldn't be planting high water non-native plants. We just don't have the water. And we shouldn't be planting invasive plants. So fountain grass, Spanish broom, in some areas, Mexican feathergrass. There's a lot of plants that once they're happy in your garden, they're going to set seed and they take off. And a lot of those are actually the plants that are spreading the fires the fastest. They're short plants. They go dormant a lot during the summer. And they when the Santa Ana winds come and there's a fire, it creates this 1 or 2 foot tall like brush that just spreads really quickly. So that's my threshold. If it's a rosemary, if it's a lavender, if it's an olive tree, even though olives, if they're not seedless, they can become invasive. Russian sage, there's so many damn beautiful non-natives that I would encourage you guys to use. But I first always try to use the natives. I don't know if that really answered your question though. You could feel free to unmute yourself if you want to elaborate some more.
Well, it's just because I live like Bridget said in Las Virgenes area, and the Woolsey fire did wipe out some stuff. A lot of it's growing back, and I just, I noticed that some people get like wildflower packets of native seeds from the Thomas Paine Foundation and stuff. Like, is that helpful to put those in nature, or is that not helpful? Or and if I see something invasive, do I pull it if I happen to be hiking through, or do I leave it? So yes. Not just non-native.
Yeah, those are great questions. So the last question, if you're on national parks territory, I don't think they want you to touch anything. But between you and me, Melissa, if it's right next to the trailhead and you're not making a new trail, get it. We don't want you going off trail to get stuff. So there's that. But if it's private property or who knows who owns it, by all means, that's amazing that you would want to do that. That's like service to your community, really, to kill that before it seeds. The important part is to kill the flower, right? Is to break off the seed before it forms, because we don't want seed in the seed bank. The other one is a very long discussion. I've sat in meetings that are hours long where there's debates and there wasn't any good answer. There's a lot of different sides. What I will tell you, and this is why I'm so happy with what I do, is that we recently received a grant to hand out plants to the public. We have 2 types of people who are going to qualify for these free plants. Low income people or folks with less resources than middle class and upper class folks who might not have access to native plants. And we just received this grant, I believe, like a week or 2 ago. So we're still figuring out how we're actually going to distribute it. We're not going to distribute the plants until November, the best time to plant. And seeds. And the other one is people who are affected in the burn area, right? The Woolsey fire, the Thomas fire. We have seed. We have genetic local seed that we can give out. We don't have a ton, and seed is hard. It's very, very hard to establish. When you do seed, you want to have 2 strategies. The first strategy is, are you sowing it for it to grow then, or are you sowing it for it to grow in ideal conditions, right? Sometimes if you were to take seed and just throw it out there right now, not ideal conditions, you would not want to have that seed germinate right now. Most of the seed that's going to flower right now has germinated back in December or January. So that's why we encourage people to plant November, December. If you're just setting seed out there and hoping when the conditions are right, maybe a year or 2 or 3, when the seed coat deteriorates, because a lot of the seed coat has to deteriorate. It's not like tomato seed that the seed coat's so soft, you just put it, you bury it, like 4 days later, the seed's up. Those damn things are so easy. Some of our seed, especially the desert and the hard-coated seed, has to sit out in sun for years. It has to get blasted by wind for years. And then sometimes it has to go through fire. And that's not going to happen all in 1 year. You put stuff out and you wonder why your plants aren't growing. It's because what you see growing now may be the seed of 2012. It may be seed from 2008. It's probably a mix. So if you're looking for quick results, I always recommend that people prime their seed. They get their seed ready for that year. It's that year or nothing. And what priming is, there's different methods of priming seed. The easiest one to do at home is just to soak your seed in warm water overnight. Once you do that though, you've primed it, you've woken it up. right? These plants are sleeping. And once you've woken it up, there's no going back, right? It's fat. It's like frijoles. If you're gonna make beans, if you ever soak them overnight and you don't cook them the next day, like they took water in. You got to do something with it. They're not dry no more. So I would figure out what the difference is, right? If you just want to throw your seeds out there and when the time is right, they will hopefully wake up. Or if you want to force them now. And if you do prime them, you want to sow them with rain, or if not, you make the rain yourself with the hose, right? So let's avoid the Theodore Payne stuff. I used to work at Theodore Payne. I worked there for a year at the nursery. I love the folks at Theodore Payne. The executive director is a good friend of mine. We're in a band together that does nothing but native plant songs. I love Theodore Payne, but some of their stuff is not local, right? And they'll admit, I know Jenny who runs the seed bank there. She's great. And if you ask her this question, she would do her best to get you genetically local. But I know they're not collecting stuff from the Santa Monica's. So we have an answer here. I might not have an answer for everybody else, but I can happily say, hit us up. If you can prove that you live in that area, we can supply you with some seed.
Okay, next question. So you had mentioned this a little bit about planting in November is the best time, but is it too late now to plant California natives?
No, negative. We plant, like we planted over 25,000, or we're planting over 25,000 plants this year in restoration sites. We're not going to get water to those things, but we're going to get like 3 or 4 doses of water to some of those. So it's best to plant it when it's cool, when it could be rain, etc. You can plant all year here in California. So let me break Southern California into 3 different groups. You guys figure out which group you're in. If you're in Oxnard, if you have to put a jacket on like almost every night, like you're in Oxnard. You're in Pismo Beach. You're in like parts of Malibu. You're in parts of Huntington Beach. Parts of those areas that get that coastal fog influence. Plant all year. It doesn't matter. Plant it, throw it, take a poop on it, step on it. Who cares? It's so easy all year. Then you move away from that, and you're in what's the middle territory: Camarillo, Thousand Oaks, downtown LA, Beverly Hills, Irvine. Those areas, they get 85 degrees. In Oxnard, my family's from Oxnard. I lived in Oxnard for 12, 13 years. There's no air conditioners, at least not in the homes that I was in. You start to go to Camarillo, to the higher end neighborhoods, they have air conditioners. The lower income neighborhoods usually don't have air conditioners, but it gets warm. Those are warm areas. So are you in the warm area, or are you in straight up desert? Like if climate change continues in 50 years, it's going to be desert. Are you in Chino Hills? That's probably going to be desert pretty soon. Parts of Pasadena, Claremont, parts of Sylmar sometimes, Santa Clarita. You guys know, it's like, damn, it's freaking hot. It's gonna be 100 degrees again. And I love that heat, but so figure out which side you're in. What was the question, Bridget? I forgot. Dude, I can talk. Why don't I just answer a question sometimes? Why the hell do I have to just talk? Well, I don't even know what your question was. What was the question?
I think.
Oh, can we plant? So the coastal all year, the middle all year, but in the middle, do not plant stuff that is sensitive. And the easiest way to tell something sensitive is it's expensive. If it's really hard to find, if it's twice the price of everything else. But I'm kind of kidding, but I'm actually not. That's the easiest way. But most manzanitas, most ceanothus, Matella hot poppies, island bush poppies, Trichosta melanatum, which is woolly blue curls, bush lupins. These plants I would not plant during the dry season. I would not plant from May to October. They're super easy in those areas during the wet seasons, but not during the dry. And I also wouldn't plant any small pots. We grow a lot of 4 and 5 inch pots. They're basically this tall. Why am I showing you? You guys know what 4 and 5 inches is, no? So I would not plant those during May and October there, because they're so small that the soil dries out really fast and they're hard to get established. So you can plant 1 gallons and 5 gallons. Remember what I said about 5 gallons, they take a while to get established. So watch out what you're doing, make sure you give enough water. And then once you hit claritos like Claremont, Chino Hills, like those hotter areas, I really would stop planting anything except for what we call wetland plants, riparian plants, and woodland plants, which normally are wetter anyways. So willows, mugwort, even oaks you could plant during the summer. They're used to having wet feet a lot of the year or being close to water. Sycamores, yerba mansa, and then desert stuff. You can plant all it'll laugh at your 100 degrees. It'll think it's cold. So desert plants are really easy to plant during the summer too. So the butylons, desert willows, those things. Anything else, I would just wait. I would wait till November to about kind of April or May is the last you want to plant in those hot areas.
Awesome. Thank you. Next question is, I have a friend with a manzanita on her property, hoping to get some advice on how I can grow it by getting a cutting.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. I feel like that's someone like I planted. I'm like, hey, could you ask a question about manzanita? Because it's going to make me sound kind of smart. So manzanitas, I guess I just break the whole world into groups. So there's really easy plants to propagate. You could stick them in water. There's a few natives that you can do that way. Then most of the natives are in the middle where they're not that easy, but they're really not that hard. And there's some that are harder, right? And actually there's some that are super hard that I don't even mess with anymore. But the manzanitas are on the harder level. And the only reason they're hard is because they take a long time to root. There's no amount of root hormone, heat. There's nothing that you can do to make manzanita root faster than 3 months. I don't know of anything, right? And I've worked in this for over 15 years. That goes from Arctostaphylos uva ursi, maybe uva ursi you could do in nine weeks. But Arctostaphylos and Munzii, all the small ground cover ones, which are from northern areas with a lot more water, to Arctostaphylos glauca, Ruffucriensis, rainbow, and all the Southern California bush ones. They need very specific things. Here's what they need. When you take the cutting, you take it now. Ideally, you would have taken it back in December, January, February, but there should be good material on it now. And the way to see the good material is it's really easy on most manzanitas. It's the stuff that flowered this year. Manzanitas are really cool. When they flower, that part of that stem stops, and at the flower, it breaks into new growth for the next year. And so you can see where it flowered and it stopped, and then there's usually 2, 4, 8 different stems coming up from that one area. Those stems are what we use. And so we took cuttings like 2 weeks ago, some manzanitas. We took cuttings about 6 weeks ago of other manzanitas. The winter is always the best time. And what you do is we use a 10% rooting hormone. But here's the most important part. You want to put your 3 to 5 inch long manzanita cutting with only 2 leaves on top, so 1 on each side. You get rid of all the leaves. It should look basically naked. And you put it in 100% perlite. If you can't do 100% perlite, you put it in 90% perlite with either peat moss or cocoa coir. And what that does is create a lot of air. There's a ton of air in there. And the cocoa coir, the peat moss, holds on to a little bit of water. And that's all you need to do. And what I do is I pick up the trays to see when they're light. It's like I used to be a waiter, right? And the best recommendation I could tell you guys about watering is pretend you're a waiter. If you're a waiter, you should be able to close your eyes and go to someone with a cup of coffee. Well, maybe go to them first because you'll probably run into them if your eyes closed. But close your eyes and pick up their cup of coffee. You should be able to feel if that cup is empty. You should be able to feel if that cup's full, and you should be able to feel if your cup is half full. That's what we want to do with our trays. You should be able to feel how heavy that damn tray is when you just watered it. And you should be able to feel when that tray is super light. You never want it to be heavy unless you just watered it. And you never want it to be light. Like, whoa, you can like lift it like a kid, like a little kid could lift it up. You always want it to be in the middle. And the hard part with manzanitas is it takes 3 to 4 months for them to root. So you have to play that game. It's like a damn customer who's you ever have customers that just milk that table for like 3 hours? Like, oh, I don't know if I got to go back to him. And should I refill his coffee? I don't know. He's on the phone. Like, so with sages, with mugworts, they root sometimes in 4 to 6 weeks. So they're quick. They're in and out, right? 40-minute lunch. They're good. They leave you your $12 tip. You're good. You have 12 pack after work. And I'm reliving my Olive Garden days now. But the whole key is that we don't need a mist system on the leaves of manzanitas. There's very little water in those leaves, so there's no need to keep the tops wet. You want to keep the bottom in lightly moist soil. You never want the stems to be in water, but you never want the stems dry, right? They are a little bit on the trickier side, so whoever wants to try manzanitas, I would strongly recommend you try a very easy native too, because there's a good chance you're going to kill a lot or all of your manzanitas, but I don't want you to get discouraged. So try something easy. Let me give you 5 easy natives that while you're killing your manzanitas, you should have success with. So these are pretty easy to find like everywhere. Some just kind of in native nature and then some in landscaping. So Galvesia speciosa, which is island snapdragon, is just the go-to. When I used to do classes at Rancho Santa Ana, we have a bunch of island snapdragon. It's so easy. It's so quick to root, so easy to root. It's a beautiful plant, so people like it. Coyote bush, Baccharis pilaris, is very easy to root. It's quick. It's more of a shrub, but it gives you success. It's hard to kill, and you feel good, right? All of the willows are super, super easy to root. Those are more of trees, but they give you at least practice. Mugwort, Artemisia deglacciana, is very, very easy to root. So I would try one of those. And then if you want to get a little bit harder, I would try one of the sage hybrids. The purple sage hybrids are beautiful. It's like Allen Chickering, Pozo Blue, and even any of the purple sages like Figueroa, Point Sal. Those are all beautiful and fairly easy sages. The white sage is on the harder part. It's a little bit harder to root. So I would try the easier sages while you're killing your manzanitas. You'll see the sage should have roots in about 6, maybe 8 weeks, depending on the weather. The manzanitas are going to take a long time, right? It's that 3 to 4 hour customer who knows when they're going to leave and how do you keep them happy and etc. Man, I can talk, Bridget. Sweet Jesus. Okay, that was like 3 questions so far, huh? I'm going to start cutting these answers.
All right. So the next.
Thank you.
The next question is, what natives can support an ecosystem that eliminates destruction of soil by critters? For example, their soil gets routinely tossed and dug into by squirrels and skunks.
Oh man, Bridget.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding. That's hard, guys. I don't know what to do about ground squirrels. So I used to work at the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden, and we used to trap ground squirrels. We could get 2-3 ground squirrels in a trap in less than an hour sometimes. The best thing to do with ground squirrels is to trap them and then remove them, right? I mean, not to get graphic, but we used to, not at the Botanic Garden. I don't want to spread rumors, but at another location I worked at, we used to kill them humanely. Is that a word? Can you really do humane killing? But we, as humanely as possible. That worked for us. Trapping is pretty easy for ground squirrels. What was the other one? What was the other critter?
Skunks.
Skunks?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had a class yesterday or Wednesday where somebody asked me about skunks. I have no idea about skunks. And I should have looked it up. I hate being stumped by questions, and then this is like just a bad habit. I have no idea. But what I told that last person about skunks is, because they told me what the skunks were doing. I think they were like eating the bugs on their plants, and they were destroying their plants while they're doing it or something. So maybe skunks, like some rabbits, like some other small furry creatures, don't like smelly stuff, which doesn't make sense. That makes no sense at all, because skunks, they're kind of smelly. But I was recommending trying like smelly stuff, so like artemisias, the mugworts, the sages, the woolly blue curls. There's a lot of different plants that have scents that maybe might work. But apart from trapping, the ground squirrels are very easy to trap as long as you don't live in a wildland area. They're super easy to trap. The skunks, I have no idea. So I'm sorry. Strike one. That was a bad answer. It's a good thing it's a free class.
The next question is from Julio, and he wants to know, when are baby native plants ready to be planted in the ground?
Is that our Julio? Is that a CNC Julio?
This is I think this is the
nice. Okay, so I like to think of plants as kids, right? And when you move them up, let's say that cutting. So whoever asked about the cutting, when you pull it out in about 3 to 4 months and it has roots, it's not ready to go in the ground. It's a first grader. He's not ready for 4th grade. He needs to go to 2nd grade. 2nd grade is what we call a rose pot in the nursery world. A rose pot is a 3 1/4 inch tall pot. You can just type in rose pot or 3 1/4 inch pot on Google, and you'll find it's a beautiful little green, black, or maybe terracotta pot. We fill it with light soil. That cutting that has a bunch of roots will root into the soil. And once he roots into that soil, he's ready to go to 4th grade. 4th grade is usually a 4 inch or a 1 gallon. And then from there, once he's rooted in to the 1 gallon or to the 4-inch, we can put him into the ground. So it's kind of unfair, the answer I'm going to give Julio, because I'm copping out. But it really depends on the plant. Was it a cutting? Was it a division? Was it a seed? I'm going to assume that it was by seed, and let's just say white sage. So white sage in a pot, or they go in a tray when you grow it. We like to transplant the sages when they're seedlings, when they have 2 sets of leaves. So you can see one set of leaves and then the other one emerging. Cool, that guy's ready for first grade. And at that point, we put him either in that rose pot, that 3 1/4 pot, or a 2-inch pot. What I would recommend for white sage, because it's a little bit harder, they can die very easy from overwater. I like to put them in 2-inch. So basically, I like to put them in first grade and give them some softball questions. Like, is this A? Is this the number 2? Yes, good. And what I do is 2-inch and light soil. I mix a very light soil for the sages. I can give you guys what that soil mix is. We use 2 different types of soil at the nursery. We use a very good potting soil for almost everything. And then for our very delicate stuff, our soft stuff, we use a 3-part mix. So we use a very good soil as 1 part. We use perlite as the other part. And then we use either peat moss or a seed starting mix, which is basically the same thing as the other part. And we mix those even, right? So we have soil, perlite, peat moss. And when you have that, it's a very soft soil. It's a very easy soil. And the plants root really easily. And it's hard to overwater that soil. So to follow Julio's question, once the seed wakes up and it has 2 leaves, 2 sets of leaves, we'll put him in a 2-inch with the light soil. Once he's rooted in, so you knock the plant out and he holds on to the soil because he's rooted in. Once he's there, he's ready for a 4-inch or a 1 gallon. You could do either with white sage. And then once he's in the 4-inch or the 1 gallon, remembering where you're at, if you're in Oxnard, Camarillo, or Riverside, remember where I told you when to plant. You plant that time of year from your 4-inch or for your 1 gallon, right? So the answer is most plants we want to plant in 4-inch or quarts, we call them, or 1 gallons when they're rooted in. You should be able to knock the plant out and none of the soil falls or very little falls because it's a root ball. And that's when they're ready. They graduated, they're ready to go off to Oxnard College, get that part-time job, maybe find a girl that they like, but then they're not really serious. They're not really sure if they want to commit, but then they get a kid and too much personal information. Let's go, Bridget, next. Did that answer Julio's question?
Julio, let us know if that answered your question. And just to clarify, that was the intern, Julio, not the staff person.
Okay, cool.
The next question, though, is regarding the California buckwheat. Susie wants to know if it can be turned into flour and used in the kitchen.
So that's a really good question. So California buckwheat is not the buckwheat that you would find at like a store. For like, you could find like buckwheat flour. I think you find online or like certain stores you can buy it with like next to whole wheat flour or other flours. So that's not California buckwheat. It's not the same plant. I do believe they're in the same family, but it's not the same plant. So I know a lot of Native folks. I was the lead organizer for the Native Food Symposium, California Native Food Symposium 2015. We had over 250 people there. We had the Parkers there, who a famous Native family from the Yosemite area. They were making a traditional acorn. I know a lot of people in the Native California indigenous world. If any of you are, feel free to chime in. But I have never seen or heard of any current Native folks using California buckwheat. What I have seen is a lot of hipsters, and I don't want to put any insult out there, a lot of like foragers using buckwheat. But I'm not sold on it. If you guys have ever grown buckwheat or tried to clean it, it's really hard to clean. There's hundreds of flowers on this, like on a thing that much, and the seed is inside the flower, and it's really hard to get the seed away from the chaff so really what you're eating, what you would be eating, is the flour plus the seed. And no one has ever convinced me that tastes good. I think it's edible, but I've read a lot of Native books. Like I said, I've done conferences and workshops, and I do a Native food class myself, and never once have I recommended buckwheat for food. I'm not saying it's not edible. I just don't think it's a very good food. There are so much other foods, native California foods like mesquite, chia, red maids that are so much easier to harvest, so much easier to process. That I'm not really sure where that, actually, I know where it's from some foragers. And that's cool. If you guys want to eat it, it's cool. I just don't think that it's, yeah. Anyways, that's my opinion.
Alrighty.
Hopefully that answers the question.
The next question is someone from Instagram who asks, can native plants be grown indoors? And if so, which ones?
Every native plant can be grown indoors for about 10 days, and then they all die. Every last one of them. Not really, but this is so hard for me to grow native plants indoors. I'm going to admit, I don't think I'm a very good grower. I think there are some amazing propagators out there. There are some people who their whole life is growing. I'm a decent grower. I can grow a lot of stuff, but some of the specialty stuff, I don't really want to take the time to learn how to grow it. That being said, I've grown a lot of stuff, guys. It's show me 5 native plants that grow indoors. I can't even tell you one besides ferns. The native ferns grow well indoors, but apart from that, that's it. Dahlias, all of them have died for me. The monkey flowers have all died. And what it is the amount of air circulation that's in the house is minimal. The amount of light that's in a house is usually minimal. The soil, even if you have the best soil and if you pay attention, it's really easy to overwater indoors because there's no air, there's very little light, right? So that it's like that customer at the restaurant who's drinking very little coffee. You're like, it's been 2 weeks. You should have drank some coffee, and you give him coffee. He's like, ah. And then our plants hate being overwatered. And so all that makes, I'm done trying native plants indoors. You know what? Actually, Juncus worked for me. Juncus patents worked for me. They looked pretty good for months. Juncus patents did. I don't want to encourage you guys not to try, but everything that's worked was shade plants and riparian plants. So try those. But if you want to try like a monkey flower, like a beautiful sticky monkey flower, like I'm willing to bet money that thing's dead in like 2 or 3 months. Like if not, I'll come and kill it. I don't know why I just said that's abusive. I'm just kidding, but it's really hard, guys. It's really hard. So think about what the conditions are for an indoor pot. That's Brazil. That's a Brazilian rainforest. That's like Houston, like river, right? That like when it rains during the summer, we just don't have a lot of those conditions, and it makes sense that our plants really don't know what to do. I'm gonna just go out on a limb here and just buy a houseplant, buy a beautiful houseplant from your local nursery, support them, and keep our natives outdoor. Now, outdoors on your balcony is something all different. We could do that all day long, but indoors, it's been very, very hard for me.
That balcony, there's a balcony question that we're gonna get to soon.
Okay, look at that. That was almost a good segue right there. That was almost a good segue.
So Susie wants to know if natives grow fuller when harvested from or when they're left alone.
I don't think I understand the question. Like grow bigger? Or
Susie, do you want to clarify in the chat while we answer the next question?
I could do that. Yeah.
Awesome.
Oh, that's our Susie. Yeah, what's up, Susie? So what are you harvesting?
Well, I'm just wondering in general, like, is it better to harvest and take from native plants so that they grow bigger? Like, would they grow bigger if we were to harvest from them, or would that like stunt their growth if we were to harvest from them?
That's a really good question. I don't know you very well, Susie. I would say I don't know you at all. I love your name. But that's a really intuitive, I don't know if intuitive is the right word. That's a really interesting question. So hopefully you stick with plants, because those are the type of questions that plant people ask. So here's the answer, like the stupid answer, and stupid for me, is the plants will get rid of whatever they need to. It's so beautiful what happens. Let's take white sage, for example. White sage has all these beautiful stems. People in Subaru hatchbacks will come and try to steal all the stems. But for the most part, they have beautiful white stems, and then they try to have sex. They try to make babies. They try to reproduce for the next year. So they'll flower, and the bees will come, and other pollinators will come. They'll have sex with that flower. They'll pollinate that flower. The flower stalk will dry. The seed will dry, and then that part breaks off. And when the part breaks off, it's really pretty. I think it's like the kid or the baby's either leaving their mother, if you're thinking of humans, or like the kids leaving home, right? They're gone and the mother remains. So the mom is she's gonna do her own. She'll get rid of everything, and it's the really cool thing. Like toyon and elderberry, like some of our fruits need to go. Well, not toyon and elderberry, but there's some fruits that need to go through like acid scarification. The seed does to replicate going through a bird's body, the stomach, the acid, right? So the plants know they've developed this really cool relationship with either birds or insects or whatever is going to eat them, or the wind. Sometimes they'll have hairs on them, and the wind, they open up and the wind takes the seed. So they'll do their own thing. I know for fruit, if we, like, let's take grape, for example, California wild grape. The grapes sometimes grow so big, 15, 20 feet a year, and they set so many flowers and then so much fruit that the fruit doesn't taste good. Because it's like a mom. The best way I can describe it is like a mom with 30 kids. Can't take care of every kid. And sometimes the soil that we're putting our wild grape on is really nice clay soil. We're watering it and the plant loves it. It responds by overgrowth and overproduction. Apple people will do this. Plums, like a lot of the stone fruits, you'll go and thin your fruit. You'll get rid of some of the flowers before they set the fruit so that the fruit is higher quality for humans, right? Just because it doesn't taste good to humans doesn't mean the seed is probably good. The birds will still eat it and they'll disperse it out there. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I don't think we ever really need to harvest, especially seed, because the plant will do that itself, unless there wasn't something natural, maybe like, let's say like a specific bird, or like, I think with chocolate and then like, what's the other one? There's like certain plants from like southern Mexico that have like specific pollinators that have like long little beaks that don't exist out here. So a lot of the farmers have to get there and pollinate by hand. So unless we're talking about that, I don't really think it affects. I mean, it does affect, but I don't know that it affects that much one way or the other, right? The plant will take care of itself if it's in the right spot. Does that answer your question?
It's a good answer. Thank you.
Okay. Notice how she didn't say it answered her question though.
All right. So what are your top 5 native food sources?
Yeah, I will. Is this the talk? Let me see if this is the talk. This might be their native food talk. Yeah, right here. Oh no, yeah. So let me go up. I'll just show you. I'm just lazy. Look at that. I'm lucky that I got on this food. So this is my native food talk that I give. So miner's lettuce is number 1. That is the only annual that I recommend for people. If you're just starting, you can do whatever you want. But if you're just starting, miner's lettuce is the only annual. So it'll be dead in 3 to 6 months. This grows under oak trees. It's super easy to eat. It tastes good to everybody. Sometimes you give people like new stuff, and they're like, nah, I'm good. Miner's lettuce is a soft, mild flavor. So that's easy. The only thing about miner's lettuce is it wakes up. So the seed wakes up in winter and spring, and it goes to sleep during the summer. You can reseed it during the spring and summer. It just needs to be in shade. It won't work in full sun in Claremont during the summer. Hummingbird sage is super easy to eat, and it's a beautiful plant. The easiest way to eat it is to get 3 to 5 leaves and put it in a mug, put some hot water on it, and make a tea. The way I love to use it is in agave syrup and honey, and you blend 3 to 5 leaves in a small bottle, and they can keep for months if you want. And we use it on yogurt, ice creams, pancakes, lo que sea, wherever you would use honey and agave syrup. And my favorite way to use it, the coolest way to use it, is to take the leaves, the big ones, and to fry them for like 20 or 30 seconds. And it's almost like a kale chip. But if you guys know the smell of hummingbird sage, it's like this tropical, like pineapple sage smell. And they make beautiful chips. That's like the most hipster thing I do. You can crack salt and if you want pepper on it, and then go to Ojai or like Santa Monica and charge people like $6 a plate for it. I use Cleveland sage hybrids. So if you guys can see my arrow right here, these 4 different plants are hybrids. So it's like a Chumash person and a Mexicano having kids. And so half Chumash, half Mexicano. So these are half purple sage, half Cleveland sage. And the Cleveland sage has a really good taste. And the purple sage makes it not as strong and a very easy plant to grow. And these, I believe it or not, I make as a pesto. I use the leaf as a pesto. And then there's a brewery in West Covina that's using this to make beer. And I have friends who have made it with ice or use ice cream as a flavoring, almost like you would use lavender and rosemary. This onion is pretty cool to use, but I'll skip that one. That's more of like an herb. Mesquite is probably the one that everyone should start using if you can afford it. Mesquite is everywhere in Mexico, in northern Mexico, through New Mexico, through Arizona and parts of California. You can see the distribution from California right there. But mesquite is super good for folks who have diabetes or their families, their history can se parecen de diabetes. It doesn't have any gluten in it, so it doesn't rise, so it's hard to make bread out of it. But there's folks in Tucson that are making livings that have small businesses making mesquite tortillas, mesquite cookies, mesquite breads, mesquite mole. There's 2 books. This is one. Eat Mesquite, this same group put out a whole new book on using mesquite. It's everywhere. There's millions of mesquites in the desert, and they all produce food. So that is probably the most important food for us to start using. And then for grapes, or they go for fruits, the easiest to eat would be this one, Rogers Red Wild Grape. That's from Northern California. And then I love using Golden Currant. Golden Currant is about 4 weeks away from being ready. Susie, Julio, and Carmen will take you guys to harvest Golden Currant. So sweet. And if one day, back in the day, I used to think that I was going to start a native food farm, and Golden Currant would be one that I would sell the living hell out of. And then there's elderberries and huckleberries too. Anyways, I think those are a few foods that are low water, easy to grow, and I think the more important part is easy to eat, right? Because you notice acorns aren't on here, but acorns are probably the most important food in California.
All right, next question. Which native fuchsia is easiest to grow?
That's a good question. So stay away from, there's a few different fuchsias. Well, no, there's a lot of different fuchsias, but there's different species, right? So stay away from Epilobium septentrionale, which is the species, or anything that's from that species. And you can just look it up on the internet and see what it is. Really, all the other ones are very easy. Catalina is probably the weediest. Catalina is like 2 to about 4 feet tall. They use that in Phoenix to give you an example of how much heat it'll take. And then just straight up Epilobium canum or just California fuchsia on its own is good. Some of the ground covers can be a little hard. The ones that grow lower, they don't like clay soil with water all the time. But if you guys are just clay soil and you just stop watering, water every 21 days, every 3 weeks during the summer, all those Epilobium canums are very, very easy. It's when we water too much that they have trouble. So Catalina would be the easiest, or just the regular one.
Okay. Are there any native plants that shouldn't be planted together?
Oh, it's so dry out here. It's so windy. My eyes are broken. Sorry, what was it? Is any plant good with cannabis sativa? What was the question?
Are there any native plants that shouldn't be planted together?
Ooh, that's a good question. I have a dream of writing a song. This has nothing to do with the question, so this is just me talking. I have a dream of writing a song about mugwort. If you guys know mugwort, Artemisia douglasιana, which occurs in wet areas and shady areas. And then Artemisia californica, which is sagebrush, which occurs sometimes 10 feet away, but up on the hill in full sun. I have a dream where it's a song where they would meet at a dance and they really like each other, but they can't live together, right? California sagebrush can't exist with mugwort, and mugwort can't exist with sagebrush. And it's this love, and one of them eventually just tries to live with the other, and it's just a disaster. So with that being said, riparian plants that need water, mugwort would not be one of them, because it is riparian, but it can tolerate pretty dry conditions. But plants that need wet feet, like they absolutely need water, like willows. It's really cool. If you know our mountains, or it's really like distinct, like in Phoenix, or like desert areas, and you can see overhead shots, and you can see where the water runs because it's green, and the rest of the area is very dry. Any of those plants that occur in those green spots, they need water, and they would be very hard to grow with our manzanitas, with our flannel bushes, with our plants that we know would almost instantly die with summer water, right? So those are two for sure that you would not want to mix together. Other than that, I know, because I used to be in the farming and like, all that, I know that they have like companion plants, and there's plants that like strengthen each other or help each other out. I don't really know of native plants like that they're in either a good way or a bad way. But I think for the most part, it would be the water requirements. If you have something that needs drip every 4 days, like a willow or a water source, and then you have a flannel bush that I've seen die from people watering it twice during the summer, those would be incompatible.
I have a north-facing yard. What California native plants should I install?
Is that person on with us? Because I would like to ask them where they live, because I think that'll matter a little bit.
Yes, it's Julio, our staff member, who asked
Okay.
that.
And then where does Julio live? Like, I want to get his address so I can Google Maps it and see how much money he makes. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Like, is it in
Whittier.
Oxnard? Whittier. Okay, so Whittier is in the middle, right? It's not the 100 degrees every day during the summer. It's like 85 to 95 during the summer at the hottest. So the north side, if you guys don't know, the north side is probably the coolest side of most houses. Even during the summer, it might only get part sun, fairly shady. So we can use, believe it or not, Julio, a lot of our manzanitas love that area. They love the warmness that Whittier has, but a lot of our manzanitas hate direct desert sun. So they love full sun where you're at and part shade. So don't be afraid to use manzanitas in that area. I love using manzanitas in part shade. I would never use them in part shade along the coast because it's too cool. But almost all the manzanitas, from the Dr. Hurd and Austin Griffiths, which can be 8 to over 10 feet tall, to the middle ones like Sunset and Howard McMahon, to the ground covers are all good. Then you can use Island Snapdragon, is a great shade plant. Hummingbird Sage is a great part shade plant. The monkey flowers look amazing there because there's always light, but there's never direct light. So the monkey flowers are pretty easy there. The Dudleyias, you'd want to stay away from stuff like California buckwheat, white sage, those plants that really need full blasting sun. But lemonade berry, sugar bush, they would all do really well there in that part shade situation. Heucheras, I could make you a huge list of plants that would love that. Elderberry, toyon, coffeeberry. No penstemons. For the most part, penstemons want to be in full sun, but like seaside daisies would do well there if you're looking for perennials. Milkweed would do really well there. Yeah, if I come up with a few more, Julio, I'll throw them out to you, okay?
Awesome. Another question is, are there any native plants that are toxic to pets like dogs or chickens?
Yes. The best way to tell is to feed a large amount to your dog. Yeah, I'm just kidding. This is a really good question. And I used to have a native plant nursery in Ventura, and we used to get this a lot, and we had no answer. The best answer I could give people is, fortunately, our native plants, let's take sage, for example. So white sage, black sage, purple sage, those are all salvias, right? Just like people, like Homo sapiens, right? We're all in the Homo group. Homo sapien, there's Homo, like other, like we're related to gorillas and all that. But what I would do is I would check the plant that you want. So let's say you want to plant white sage, and go online, like Sunset Gardens. A lot of other groups have lists of genus, so types of plants that are poisonous. And if you find that salvias or sages can be poisonous, I would just stay away from that group. And if you find that salvias are not, or they say salvias are okay, I would go with that group. The only unfortunate part is that California does have a lot of plants that are only found in California, so it's a little hard to do that with some plants. But that's been a pretty good tool for me to just go online and look for salvias or look for verbena to see, because there's verbenas all around the world. To look for rhamnus. There's rhamnus all around the world. So type that in. If you want to do coffee berry, right, Rhamnus californica, you type in rhamnus, see if it's poisonous, and then it's a pretty good tool. I haven't honestly looked that question up in like 3 to 5 years probably. So things may be changing, but I don't know of a resource online for just native plants.
Okay. Finally, to the balcony question. It's a south-facing balcony that gets a lot of wind and sun. What are the best natives for that area, and what type of setup?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So what I like to do in pots, I hate to recommend it because it's expensive, but if you guys can afford it, you always want to use really good, expensive, high-quality potting soil because it's going to be easier to grow your plants in. If you can't use that expensive potting soil, then I would try to get a mix of half good potting soil and half cactus mix. Almost all of our natives can grow in either of those two mixes, right? A good potting soil or potting soil and then half cactus mix. What those do is they drain really well. They have rocks in them. They have air in them, and they're hard to overwater. The cheaper soil we have has straight up wood, like old like Nike Air Jordans. They've got like old Flaming Cheetos bags. It's just all sorts of stuff. And trust me, I've bought plenty of soil from the 99-cent store, but your stuff is dead on impact unless it's super easy to grow. So I would recommend that you invest some money if you can for a good potting soil, an expensive EB Stone, an expensive $12 to $15 potting soil. And if you can't do that, buy the cheaper potting soil and try to mix it with some cactus mix. So now that you got your soil set up, did she say, Bridget, does it full sun or part shade? Or are we gonna assume that it's a balcony part shade?
Yeah, it's full sun.
Okay. So again, I would ID where you're at, right? Are you in Oxnard? Are you in Camarillo, Thousand Oaks? Or are you in like Riverside? Those things matter. But let me give you a few plants that I love planting in pots. Let's start with the small pots. So small pots, we're going to say like 12 inch. Why the hell am I holding up? You can't even see this. So let's say 12 inches, like the mouth of the pot, right? I think the monkey flowers and the Dudleyias are beautiful in those pots. The monkey flowers are actually, they're easier to grow in pots than they are on the ground. In the ground, they're really easy to mess up. And as you graduate to a bigger mouth or a wider pot, you can start using some of the ceanothus, the smaller ceanothus, right? So ceanothus skylark, ceanothus maritimus. You can start using some of the small manzanitas that would come over the pot, like Arctostaphylos Carmel Sur, Arctostaphylos emerald carpet. Emerald carpet's really hard to grow in Southern California because it needs an acid soil, but in a pot, it's very easy to grow because you can maintain those things. And so what I like to do is do the manzanitas coming over the pot and then use something coming up, right? So your up thing would be that monkey flower. You could have some of the smaller sages, like black sage does really well in full sun or part shade. Penstemons look beautiful in pots. And then as you get bigger to almost like the size of a wine barrel, then what I like to do in wine barrels is I like to do 2 or 3 different plants. Probably my favorite combination is hummingbird sage in a wide pot, because I like to eat hummingbird sage, right? You can just smell it. And then something upright. Lepichinia fragrans, which is pitcher sage, smells really good, and it's a perfect companion for hummingbird sage. But if you can't do pitcher sage, then you can throw something 2 to 4 feet tall inside that. So you could do one of the smaller ceanothus, one of the smaller manzanitas, one of the smaller sages, even like a coffee berry. I would stay away from the bigger stuff like the lemony berry, toyon. Those are all too big. But the manzanitas and the ceanothus are actually pretty cool potted plants once you get into a little bit bigger pot. And probably the 2 easiest plants, native plants, that just, you put them on their own and they're beautiful all year, is island snapdragon, the one that I said for propagating is super easy, and then verbena de la mina. If you have those on your balcony, just an island snapdragon and a verbena de la mina, you could probably have flowers all year off those two plants. They're beautiful. They're easy to contain, or they're easy to maintain. What you want to remember in your pots, I haven't really talked about fertilizer except for that compost in the ground. What you want to remember about pots is that those plants are not rooted into the ground, so they're always going to need food. And so I would always recommend fertilizer for pots. Every 3 to 6 months, you want to feed your native plants. If you've had a native plant in a pot for more than a year and you haven't given it new fertilizer, you're stressing your plant out. They're used to being 5 to 10 foot depth with their roots and wide, and they're tapping into these minerals and all these things that we can't see. And you're stressing them out by keeping them in this small pot and girdling the roots because they're in there for way too long, and you're watering them and they want to grow, but there's no nutrients, right? So you need to feed your native plants. In the ground, not so much. In a pot, every 3 to 6 months, they need food. What do you think, Bridget?
Awesome. We have more questions and about 10 more minutes. So what's the difference between the tropical milkweed I can get at Home Depot and the native milkweeds?
Yeah. So the native milkweed is native to California. The tropical milkweed is not. And there is some evidence that the monarchs do not get the same benefit from eating the tropical one. They will eat the tropical one all day. It's like my kids. If I put like Snickers bars and ice cream in front of them and then frijoles, beans in front of them, which one are they going to eat? They're going to eat the ice cream. It's not good for them. They don't know any better because monarchs are stupid. I'm just kidding. They're not. I want to see if you guys are still awake. You guys aren't. It's all good. So we need to stop planting the tropical milkweed because it's awake almost all year, and it doesn't let some of our monarchs go to sleep. And it's also harboring. It keeps some, I don't know what the insect is. I'm not a monarch expert, but it does, because it's there all year, it harbors one of the pests, the disease that the caterpillars get. And so we're seeing that instead of going dormant, this milkweed is staying evergreen, and the pests are there. The monarchs are laying their babies, and their caterpillars are waking up with this pest in them, and they're dying. They don't ever get to form into monarchs. So by all means, if you don't do anything else from this talk, you should rip out all the milkweed that you have. It's better to let your caterpillars die than to keep that tropical milkweed, because it's a bad thing that we're doing. The native milkweed is it's on the more California path. They wake up around March, April, May. They flower around the summer, and that's what they've evolved with for probably thousands of years. And that's what we recommend that people plant.
Okay. Sue says, you've mentioned to water 2 times a month in the summer, but how much water? Is it 1 gallon per plant, a sprinkle? Let me know. My plants are in play.
Yeah. So Sue, let me ask you, what kind of irrigation system do you have?
Drip. I put in drip, but it's all on individual valves.
Okay. So with drip, if your plants have been there more than 3 to 4 months and you have gotten, like we recommend, like Tree of Life Nursery recommends, if you've gotten water under the plant, right? If you gave them 2 to 5 gallons, they have good feet. They're started. That's why we love planting during the winter. You almost never see plants grow during the winter when you plant them. They stick there, the cold, they don't ever grow for 3 or 4 months. But then right now, April, May, June, as the heat comes, they take off. And then they have a beautiful balance. The top is balanced with the bottom. They have good tops and they have good roots. But if you never gave them water, deep water, they never had a chance to establish. So as long as you have water and you feel that your plant is established, then what I recommend during the summer with drip, if you have the type of emitters that you can do it with, is pull your emitter away from the neck of the plant. Stop watering the plant, start watering the area. So a 1 gallon an hour emitter. And I know I used to work at a nursery. I asked one of the landscapers, I'm like, hey, I just want to confirm, because I know native plants don't need it, but lavender is basically native. How often do you water your lavender on drip? He's all, every 10 days. Every 10 days, 10 minutes, right? That's what I would recommend with most natives, is 10 minutes with a 1 gallon an hour. It's not going to do much, not going to penetrate much. But remember, it's ishi. We're not trying to penetrate. We're not trying to get deep. Basically, your plants from May to October are running a marathon. And if you guys have ever run a marathon, every mile, it would be really cool to have a cup of water. And that's all that 10 minutes of 1 gallon an hour is a cup of water. And then that guy's going to run for 10 more days. And he's going to go, I could really use a cup of water. I don't need it because I'm native and I'm good. But you want me to shine a little bit more? You want me to not go dormant? And so anything more than that, Sue, is really overkill, especially if you have clay soil. I've seen clay soil. It's amazing how quick with drip, because the drip is feeding it right at that spot. And if you don't ever move the emitters, and if you just keep feeding more often than every 10 days, you really start accumulating this wet spot in the soil, especially if it's clay, and you can run into some serious problems during the summer. So 10 minutes every 10 days at the most.
Awesome. Are there any native plants that specifically attract birds?
Mm-hmm. I don't know much about birds, so I'm going to tell you what I do know about a bird. What birds love in plants is they love, there's a lot more than this, but what they love from our point of view is they like to have uneven areas to hide, especially with these stupid cats that are everywhere. So imagine you're a bird and you go to a garden and it's all lawn. Where the hell are you going to hide on that lawn? Imagine if you go to a place that removed its lawn and it has a 2-foot tall penstemon, a 5-foot tall buckwheat, an 18-foot tall lemonade berry, and then a 10-foot tall manzanita. There's texture, there's structure, there's areas for them to hide. So they love these differences in height, right? They love these differences, just these different shrubs and different areas to hang out in. They adore the seed of stipa, which is one of our grasses. They adore sage seed. So there's a lot of plants where the dry seed they love, and they'll hang out. I don't know how. It looks like they would be too heavy for it, but they'll hang out on the stalks, and eventually they'll break a stalk, but they just hang out on the stalks and eat. So they love dried seed, not all, but some dried seed. And then they love fruits, right? Elderberry, toyon, are probably the two ones that they go crazy for. They love eating California grape. So those are the two things that I would recommend is you get structure in your garden. Make sure it's not a lawn, that you have 2-foot, 5-foot, 10-foot, different areas for them to hang out, and that you have seed and fruit for them to eat. And you should see a lot of, you could probably say a lot of stuff about insects. If you have pollinators, they're probably going to snatch up some pollinators. I don't really know about the insects that they like to eat, so I don't want to get into that specifically. But I think if you're just go with those two things, you're going to be on a real good path.
What are your thoughts on pest control on California natives? I know I'm planting them to attract wildlife, but I have mixed feelings about letting the bugs eat them.
What kind of pest? Is the person who asked this on the call? Still, what kind of pest were they talking about?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's a hard one without knowing pests, because would it be like rabbits and squirrels, or would it be like little insects? It sounded like they were talking about insects, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, a pest, I think when people say pest, it's something that's hurting your plant. So if it's something that's hurting your plant, you would probably want to address it to not freak out your plant. You're not planting a plant to have it die or suffer. You're planting a plant to have it be successful. And then if it attracts pollinators, all good. But there are like some instances where a pest doesn't hurt the plant. So I guess it wouldn't be a pest. The main one is the aphids on milkweed. I've done a lot of field work. I've been fortunate enough to go out to the field in the desert, 10 miles away from where anyone's ever going to go. I could go put stuff out there that no one would ever find. And even there, you still find aphids on the desert milkweed. And on our milkweeds here, we find aphids. They're little orange, yellow little dots, usually on the tips, on the new growth. And I have never once in my life seen that those aphids affect that milkweed. They're oleander aphids, so they're not native. I don't know how they got here. I mean, I guess they hang out on the oleander, the non-native oleander plants. But there are some instances where you wouldn't want to treat, and that would be one, because we don't want to put something on there that's going to hurt, like a monarch caterpillar or whatever. But if it is hurting your plant, I would try to treat the plant. What I've noticed though, Bridget, is a lot of times we have pests during the winter and spring when it's either too wet or we've added too much fertilizer and there's too much growth. And usually as stuff gets hard and tough around May or June, those pests are gone.
Mhm. All right. Well, that was the last question, and we're also at time, so that worked out.
Damn, this is the first time we're gonna finish on time?
Yeah.
Bridget, I'm used to like asking, like, what is it, like Postmates? I'm like, Bridget, can you stay on for another 3 hours? Because I'm gonna be 3 hours. What do you want? You want a Little Caesars? Let me Postmate you a little $4 Little Caesars lunch so you can stay on. I don't even know what Postmates is. Is that what they do? Do they deliver food?
Delivery service. Yeah, you had it. But thank you everyone for participating. We had a lot of great questions today. This has all been recorded as well, so if you want access to it, we can send that out. But yeah, that's it. Antonio, do you have any last statements?
No, I thank you guys for hanging out and staying awake. If any of you did, here's my email. Again, if you guys are interested, where's my email? It's the other way. Yeah, you could tell anyways, if you guys have any specific questions that you think about later, and want to ask, it's somewhere
You can
here.
also share your email afterwards with a link to this recording too.
Okay. You don't want to wait 8 minutes while I find it? There it is. And the bottom right here. I está. Cool. So yeah, thank you guys for hanging out, and I appreciate it.
All right, have a great weekend, everyone. Stay tuned for our upcoming Training Institute courses.
Well, thanks, Bridget. Nos vemos, okay?
All right, take care.
Bye, Bebo.